An Air India jet crashed seconds after takeoff, tragically resulting in the loss of 260 lives. The crash was not due to weather or mechanical failure, but because both fuel switches were mysteriously cut. Why are global regulators still avoiding real accountability?
Hello, and welcome to That News Show, where we discuss the latest facts, fakes, and hypocrisy as reported by the legacy media. Let's roll the tape.
Compounding the issue, a U.S. safety advisory had previously highlighted concerns with these switches, but Air India dismissed the warnings, since compliance wasn't mandatory. BBC News reports that the fuel switches were turned off before the Air India crash, according to a preliminary report. And why, despite numerous tragedies, does nothing seem to change? How can a modern jet operated by experienced pilots lose power just seconds after takeoff? Who benefits from this confusion? Tonight, let's challenge the prevailing narrative. When will we insist on straightforward answers not only from foreign officials, but also from the global institutions tasked with our safety? This wasn't due to mechanical failure or adverse weather, but because both fuel switches were inexplicably moved to the cutoff position. The investigation acknowledges that the switches require a two-step process to activate, making accidental engagement unlikely. When will we stop assuming that international oversight equates to accountability? Time and again, it seems that global aviation authorities and large state-run airlines are not subjected to thorough scrutiny. Now 260 lives are lost and the system continues to protect itself. This tragedy illustrates the dangers of centralized power, diffused responsibility, and a lack of accountability. Let the show begin.
Rather, the focus is here in the cockpit, in particular on the pilots, and what happened to those fuel control switches. The report says flight record data shows both switches, normally used to turn the engines on or off when on the ground, were moved, as we heard, from the run to the cut-off position shortly after takeoff, that causing both engines to lose thrust. It says, as we've heard, one of the pilots is heard asking the other why he did the cut-off. The other pilot, says the report, responded that he had.
The cockpit voice recorder captured the pilot's confusion when questioning the switch manipulation, the other denying any involvement. The design of these switches, which requires a deliberate two-step action to prevent accidental engagement, should have prevented this scenario. This underscores the need for robust, independent oversight and highlights why American regulators should avoid deeper involvement with global aviation authorities that lack transparency and enforceability. The investigation centers on the cockpit, specifically the pilots in the critical moment when both fuel control switches were inexplicably moved from run to cutoff seconds after takeoff. This action deprived the engines of fuel, resulting in an immediate and catastrophic loss of thrust. The ongoing investigation must determine whether this incident was due to human error, a design flaw, or both. This follows a typical pattern: prolonged bureaucratic investigations, corporations like Boeing deflecting blame, and international agencies shirking responsibility. Our priority should be to protect American passengers and ensure foreign operators adhere to the highest standards rather than deferring oversight to international bureaucrats who lack accountability. This type of regulatory complacency is common among international bodies and state-run enterprises, where crucial recommendations are often overlooked until a tragedy occurs, and accountability is scarce. This incident was not due to mechanical failure, external interference, or adverse weather conditions. Air India did not update the mechanisms, dismissing the advisory as non-mandatory. An FAA advisory issued years ago highlighted a potential flaw in the locking mechanism.
Now, they would not normally be used when the aircraft's in the air. There are some exceptions to that. For example, if there's been an engine failure or an engine fire, you want to cut off the fuel supply to that engine and make sure that it's not going to cause any further problems. But that is...
This incident highlights a pervasive issue that extends beyond a single airline or incident. The divide on aviation safety is stark. When a commercial aircraft is in flight, controls like the fuel cutoff switches are seldom used, except in rare emergencies such as engine failures or fires where cutting off the fuel supply is crucial to prevent further damage and ensure the safety of the aircraft. As the final report is still forthcoming, the families of the victims await answers, and the world watches to see if this tragedy will prompt a critical examination of the systemic failures in global aviation oversight. A warning from the Federal Aviation Administration about a potential flaw in the switch locking mechanism was ignored by Air India because it was deemed non-mandatory. This bureaucratic oversight is a common flaw in global aviation regulation. Vital recommendations are overlooked, and accountability is absent until a tragedy occurs. It serves as a grim reminder of the consequences when international carriers and regulatory bodies treat critical safety advisories as optional. These procedures are rigorously trained into every cockpit crew for good reason. The critical issue is whether lawmakers are prepared to insist that foreign carriers meet U.S. safety standards unequivocally. Some advocate for increased international regulatory collaboration, arguing that oversight by multinational agencies enhances safety. In contrast, the current administration emphasizes American standards and oversight, insisting on holding foreign operators to the highest standards without extending American resources abroad unless directly necessary. The media must also focus on why these safety advisories are neglected and why so many international agencies operate with minimal oversight and consequences.
Rare. Now, what we have here is information from the flight data recorder, which shows quite conclusively that those switches, both of them, were in the cutoff position, and that one of the pilots, we don't know which one, noticed this was the case and asked the other pilot why they had turned those switches into the opposite position, into the cutoff position.
The accuracy of the BBC segment in reporting the timeline and mechanical details, such as the movement of the switches and the aircraft's brief flight, is commendable. Flight data indicates that both fuel switches were in the cutoff position, and the cockpit recording captures one pilot questioning the other about this configuration. BBC News has primarily followed the official narrative, focusing on the technical sequence of events in the pilot's dialogue, yet their analysis lacks depth. In terms of sourcing, BBC News mainly uses statements from the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau and official documents, neglecting independent aviation safety experts or alternative viewpoints. While it presents the pilot's confusion and technical details, it does not address why systemic issues in international aviation oversight continue, particularly with state-run carriers. This story is not merely about a tragic accident or cockpit technicalities. This confusion with neither pilot taking responsibility signals a significant oversight in procedures and systems. The report overlooks why Air India considered the FAA advisory optional and fails to investigate how lax international regulations contributed to the tragedy. A more thorough approach would question why FAA safety advisories are not mandatory for all international carriers operating in and out of the United States, and whether American regulators should enforce stricter compliance from foreign operators. The emphasis remains on mechanical failures and procedural errors, rather than on the broader failures of oversight and the urgent need for reform. The absence of critical voices questioning the effectiveness of global regulatory bodies and the lack of focus on the affected families' frustrations, with the inconclusive findings, are notable. The coverage relies too heavily on the preliminary report's findings without pushing for greater accountability from regulatory bodies or the airline. This lack of diverse perspectives restricts the depth of the coverage and leaves viewers with an incomplete picture of the regulatory shortcomings.
Takeoff. It may be that one of the pilots made a mistake, or there may be some other motive. All we have now is those bald facts that these switches, which are incidentally designed not to be used accidentally, it's a two-step process to turn them from the run to the cutoff position. Why those switches?
From a consumer standpoint, the issue is straightforward. Why should American families pay more and bear greater risks? Because international bodies and state-run airlines refuse to adopt established safety measures. The financial repercussions of this disaster are already impacting the aviation sector significantly. Small businesses relying on affordable, reliable air travel for shipping or client meetings are also affected. Airlines, known for their razor-thin profit margins, face destabilization from such tragedies, affecting not just the carriers, but also their entire supply chain, including maintenance contractors and aircraft manufacturers. Visualizing the chain reaction, a single, unexplained action in the cockpit can trigger a cascade of consequences, from a runway tragedy to financial hardship for American households. When confidence in international carriers wanes, American travelers and businesses suffer, particularly when foreign operators are not subject to the same stringent standards as domestic airlines. This includes rising insurance claims, compensation demands from families, and potential legal actions against the airline and its suppliers. Unfortunately, globalist approaches to regulation often fail to ensure real accountability or safety enhancements, instead fostering complacency and confusion as demonstrated by this tragedy. American carriers, which are among the most heavily regulated in the world, must compete with those who may cut corners with their government's implicit approval. The reluctance of foreign carriers to adopt even basic safety recommendations underscores the importance of national oversight and sovereignty, particularly in industries where the margin for error is minimal. Sectors like manufacturing and technology, which provide essential components for modern aircraft, are also on high alert. This scrutiny often leads to swift investor reactions, resulting in sharp stock price declines that impact pension funds, retirement accounts, and the portfolios of everyday Americans, many of whom are unaware of their financial ties to global aviation. Any indication of design flaws or regulatory oversights can lead to costly recalls, disrupt production lines, and result in job losses domestically. The ripple effect reaches airports, catering services, and tourism-dependent communities that depend on a steady flow of travelers. When foreign airlines and their regulators disregard American safety advisories, considering them non-binding, it creates an uneven playing field. Until foreign operators meet the same level of accountability, American consumers will continue to bear the brunt of regulatory failures abroad. This leaves us with so many things to consider. Incidents like the Air India crash expose a different reality. A cascade of excuses, rampant finger-pointing, and a media seemingly more invested in shielding global institutions than in securing genuine accountability. We are often urged to trust international regulators, believe the official narratives, and accept that bureaucrats in distant capitals prioritize our welfare. Why then should we give up our sovereignty to those who consistently evade responsibility? It's time to question who truly benefits from this lack of accountability. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your comments below. This has been That News Show. That's all I have for now.